Good evening, everybody. Hell's Unicorn here once again. I apologize once again for the gap between videos, particularly in the aftermath of the South Carolina primary. And I thought it would actually be prudent to do a commentary before the upcoming debate tonight as opposed to after. And the reason for this is that I want everybody listening to me to focus on this with a clear head. There's been a couple of days to get past the results of the primary, which were unfortunately pretty disappointing. As best as can be articulated, what happened on South Carolina is that the poor performance in the Monday debate of last week carried over a bit and sunk our poll numbers a little bit. People that were on the fence made a decision to get off the fence and to support either Gingrich or Santorum. I am pretty well convinced that nobody in our team picked Romney. But it is conceivable, given the language that's being used, both by Santorum and Gingrich, trying to co-opt certain parts of Paul's platform, that some fence sitters who are not well educated on the nature of the full package of liberty and only want to pick and choose the parts they like probably jumped ship and voted for Newt Gingrich or Santorum. Or another and more likely scenario is that the debate performances of both Santorum and Gingrich energized the superstitious backwater evangelical base in South Carolina. Now, I know everybody's going to be asking me, what the heck am I doing ripping on evangelicals? Don't you believe in the same God as them? In short, no. But that's a topic for another video, probably one that I'll put on my John the Jansenist channel. But suffice to say, the kind of God that the people that voted for Newt Gingrich believe in is not a God of laws and a God of orderly conduct, let's put it that way. They believe in an antinomian God. They believe in a God that saves everybody regardless to what they do. I share in common with them, just for the record, the belief that sovereign, irresistible, unfailing grace, efficacious grace, as St. Augustine put it, is a necessary precursor to saving faith. However, unlike antinomians, I don't believe in a dead faith that has no works to attest to its existence. And if you look at Newt Gingrich, there are no good works of faith to look at. There's a couple of bad ones. There is a nominee or a potential nominee to the presidency who will not own up to the horrible things that he did to his first and his second wife. In fact, you can sum up the family values of one Newt Gingrich as such. Using the daughters of your first marriage to question the honesty of your second wife who is attacking your third wife. And actually, I put the full proper quote on the screen right now so that you can see it. Suffice to say, there was some sort of psychosis that was being suffered by these so-called evangelicals in South Carolina, and I think they were not voting at least on any loose definition of Christianity than just simply they were voting for the guy who was one of their own from their part of the country and someone that they believe would fight, as if simply yelling at your opponent is enough to defeat them. If that were the case, our problems in the Middle East would be over tomorrow, since we have no shortage of people in this country that yell nonsense on a daily basis at other people. That's kind of how politics works in this country. Nevertheless, what's coming up right now? Florida primary. Who is not going to be really participating in this primary to any great extent? Answer, us. The reason being is it's a very expensive state. It's a state that only awards 50 delegates instead of 100. So long story short, it's not worth it. However, it is very much worth it to participate in the two debates this week, because there will be national exposure for it, and we need as much national exposure as we can get before we start hitting the caucus states. The fourth place loss in South Carolina is primarily bad from a standpoint of momentum. Ron Paul had a fair amount of momentum coming out of New Hampshire because of his impressive second place finished. Obviously, there wasn't going to be any way for him to win this, New Hampshire, because the most populated parts of southern New Hampshire are loaded up with big government-loving idiots who moved there from Massachusetts. And unfortunately, there's not enough free staters yet to wrestle control of that state away from them. And in Iowa, it's the same story. Fairly strong liberty base in Iowa, but there is unfortunately a stronger base of big government liberals and backwater evangelicals who vote for people simply because they can out-Jesus the next person. Doesn't matter even if they're getting their Jesus right, just so long as they're out-Jesusing the other person. So, nevertheless, there is a bit of a silver lining in this. And that is that the current field has been thrown into a point of utter chaos. And I said previously that I think that the best scenario for us would be a chaotic field, and that has now occurred. Romney's national support is collapsing, and in his place is a person with no national organization to speak of. And better still, the media is so gaga over all of the drama unfolding in these debates that they're not even paying attention to these caucus states to any real degree. Now, the only thing that I didn't count on was taking fourth place behind Rick Santorum. That's a little bit embarrassing. I think maybe if we'd spent a couple more days campaigning in the state, we might have been able to reverse that, but boo-hoo, no use crying over spilled milk. But through the course of the next week, you are going to see Gingrich and Romney trying to tear each other apart, and Santorum trying to interject himself to remain relevant. What do you do when you have two enemies that hate each other, in addition to you, and are hell-bent on destroying each other? The answer is you get the hell out of the way and let them do it, and you stay on message. Let the two supposed frontrunners blow $8 or $9 million on a state that's winner take all, and the loser probably loses everything. If Gingrich loses Florida, his campaign will, for all intents and purposes, be effectively over. He's not on the ballot in a bunch of key states, and I don't think he's going to get on it. Same story with Santorum. Now, if Romney actually loses Florida, which I would think would actually be a slightly better outcome than Gingrich winning it, then Romney is going to have even more implosion on the national level, and he is going to have a hard time competing even in his strong nesting areas such as Nevada and Maine and a couple other places where people are not quite as gaga conservative as they are in the Bible Belt. There is, of course, another scenario that's probably less possible. But, you know, if you're looking at a statistical possibility, it's in there. Suppose that both Romney and Gingrich go so completely overboard on each other that they actually destroy each other completely before the Florida primary vote. There's been a lot of early voting already, so a lot of the results might already be fixed. But I've often wondered, what would happen if Romney and Gingrich do things that are so utterly embarrassing, so utterly off the wall, that a slim but noticeable majority gets turned off and it drives down turnout? Or if they vote a protest vote for either Santorum or Paul. Without a decisive victor in that state, that would imply a lot more money being blown fighting each other. And eventually, some of these gigantic donors are going to have to start questioning whether or not it's worth it to blow all of this money on these two guys if they're not going to go the distance. Bear in mind also, the electability factor is still a question. And if Romney can't contain a rabid, off-the-wall insurgent like Gingrich, his electability comes into question. And Gingrich, you know, electability might as well be pig Latin to him. That guy doesn't know the meaning of the word. People say that Paul is unelectable because he only represented one puny little district in Texas. Well, I'll tell you right now, Newt Gingrich represented an even punier district in Georgia, and he couldn't even hold his seat after the scandals broke. He had to resign in disgrace because he probably would have lost to a Democrat. The thing that Newt Gingrich is counting on, and to a lesser extent what Romney is counting on, is that the people who are voting in these primaries will do so without thinking for more than a couple of seconds. And if they start thinking, it's very possible that they'll think different. And that will be when things get very interesting. But regardless, we're in it for the caucus states. This is the path to the nomination that Obama took, and it can work just as well for us, provided that we go the distance. So I'll be back with post-debate coverage either this evening or tomorrow, depending on how I feel. With prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.